every short-term rental operator is going to have the same basis. But those that innovate, those that look towards innovation to make that guest experience better are going to be catapulted, or the ones that are going to be rewarded in the long run. So you need to understand that you need to innovate and innovate often. Welcome, my beautiful people. On this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the lessons that I've learned from studying companies like Nike, like McDonald's, like Apple, like Amazon. And I want to go through 6 different things that I learned when I study these companies and how applying these lessons to my company, how that has helped me succeed and be in the position that I am today. If you are a short-term rental operator, don't think that you can't learn from another industry or another company, because they're just the fact that they're not in the same industry that you are doesn't mean that you can't learn from them. And I strongly encourage you that you do case studies with some of these companies, especially case studies with companies that failed. I, for example, love looking at and studying companies that failed and why they failed, right? Blockbuster being one of them. And, at the time, Blockbuster was the shiznit, right? It was a big company in the industry, and today they're not around because they failed to do certain steps that I'm going to talk about here. The first thing, when I looked at these companies and when the companies that I mentioned, there was one thing that should come to mind when you're talking about these major companies. And the first thing that should come to mind, the first thing that you should be focusing on when you're starting your company is brand recognition, right? Having that strong brand identity. If you're new, and it doesn't matter if you have one short-term rental or you have thousands, you should focus on creating your brand and having a strong brand identity so that it makes it easier, or your business becomes more recognizable. But let's talk about brand recognition for a second and why the difference between someone starting new and one of the recommendations that I'm going to make. So for example, when you start new, you need to understand that it's going to take you a while to get your brand established, especially if you're small and you plan to stay small. One way you can defeat that, one way you can get a leg up on that, is if you start your business with a recognizable brand and or join a franchise. PMI is a franchise. I chose PMI for that specific reason because of the brand recognition, but I did the same thing with Dream Vacations. As I mentioned, if you're new to this channel, we just partnered up with Dream Vacation because I want to not just be known as a short-term rental operator or as a person, the go-to person for someone looking to stay at a phenomenal short-term rental. I want to be that travel expert. I want to provide that guest not just an opportunity to stay in one of my properties, but an opportunity to make their dream vacations a reality, right? I want to be the go-to person when someone's thinking about going on a vacation. I want to be that person they call and say, hey, Fernando, this year I want to go on a cruise. This year I want to go to Europe. This year I want to go to Africa. Help me plan this vacation. I want to be that guy, right? But I didn't want to start my travel agency or my company, brand new, from scratch. I wanted a leg up, and that's why I teamed up with Dream Vacations, and that's why I have PMI. I would highly recommend, if you're looking to do this as a full-time business and looking to make a lot of money, that you do the same if you don't have the time. Like, for example, I got into this later in life. If you're in your 20s, then by all means, start from scratch because you got plenty of time to create that brand recognition that you need. When you're older, time is not on your side for that sense. Let's talk about Amazon. Amazon, a lot of people forget that Jeff Bezos was in business for a decade, more than 10 years before Amazon actually took off, right? And before it started to get known. I mean, he worked out of his garage. He worked full-time. Full-time is a misnomer. He had another job while he was running and trying to create and build Amazon. But it took him, if my memory serves me right, it took him 10 years before he even decided to get a paycheck from Amazon. Everything he did for those first 10 years was creating that brand recognition and building the infrastructure necessary to create the beast that Amazon is today. Same thing could be said for all these other companies. It took them decades to be where they're at. Don't expect to start a company today and have that same brand recognition that Amazon, Apple's, other companies have in the beginning. It's not gonna happen. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is a big one, and number 2 is innovation. All these companies, one of the characteristics that has made them very successful is their ability to innovate. Let's use Apple as an example. Apple started off as a computer company, and there was a period of time in which they weren't doing great, so much so that they fired Steve Jobs, and by firing Steve Jobs, they did even worse, so they rehired him. But what took Apple from where it was to what it is today is the fact that they decided to innovate. When Steve Jobs came back, I don't know if you remember the product that he brought back and he introduced to the world that took Apple from being just a computer company to being Apple to what it is today, was the iPod. iPod, and then later on the iPhone, is what gave, or that their ability to innovate to those products is what took Apple to the next level. As a short-term rental operator, you need to do the same, right? Every short-term rental operator is going to have the same basis. But those that innovate, those that look towards innovation to make that guest experience better are going to be catapulted, or the ones that are going to be rewarded in the long run. So you need to understand that you need to innovate and innovate often. Next is global reach. And here's what I mean by global reach. I don't care if you just have one short-term rental or you have 1,000 short-term rental. Having a global reach is going to be paramount. It's going to be extremely critical and important if you want to stay in this game for the long run. We want to be able to attract guests from all over the world, and you need to have that global reach in order to do that. And in addition, marketing and having that global reach is what's going to allow you to expand if you want to expand. That global reach is also going to help you with your brand recognition, because the more people you're touching, the more people that see what you have to offer, the more your brand is going to be recognized. Having global reach is very important. We'll take Coca-Cola, we'll take Apple, we'll take McDonald's. They're worldwide. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, when you mention those names, they're going to know who they are. In our business, the similar company that has a global reach, and it's probably the reason why some of you guys are in the business, is Airbnb. Airbnb, Booking.com are two major companies in the OTA department, which is the online travel agency department. They have a global reach. But you as an individual, you as a short-term rental operator, should take advantage of that global reach and use that to market your brand. Next, one of the most important for me is quality and consistency. Doesn't matter what size company you are. Again, doesn't matter if you have one property or 1,000 properties. You always need to be thinking about quality, meaning quality of service, and being consistent, right? I've always said this, it doesn't matter what you have, it's what you do with what you have that's important. Again, let's use an example here of McDonald's. McDonald's doesn't make the best hamburger, but they're consistent on how they make their hamburgers. The quality control that they have is first class, which is why they are the company that they are, right? If you go to a McDonald's in Miami or you go to a McDonald's in LA, you're gonna get the same type of service, same type of tasting fries, and same tasting hamburger. The same thing should be said about you. If you have 10, 20, 30 properties, each one should have the same quality and experience. Like for example, if you go into one of our properties, it doesn't matter if you go into one of our properties in Colombia or one of our properties in Miami, you're going to get that same experience in terms of how we fold our towels, how we make our beds, the scent that you smell when you walk in. It's all consistent and it's all part of our branding, so you can recognize our property. You're going to see our logos in our property, but we're consistent with that, and you should be consistent as well. Next is being customer focused. This is big for me now, especially today. When I first got into the short-term rental business, my sole focus at that time was growth. I needed to grow. I didn't want just one property. I wanted hundreds of properties, right? And I spent a lot of time working and marketing and trying to get acquisitions. Today, that's not my primary focus. Today, I realize that what's more important than having the property is having a strong customer database, and that my staff is really centrally focused on customers. That guest, especially if we can provide a memorable experience, that one guest, not only can that one guest be a repeat customers for years to come, but that one guest will talk about you, will recommend you, and that one guest could potentially 10x your customer base. So being focused and centrally focused on customer service is going to be critical and important for you. The same can be said for all these companies I just mentioned. They are always thinking about the customer, and you should be thinking about about the customer as well. The last one I'm going to talk about is adaptability. More so since this has become very important, especially more so since the pandemic. You have to be able to adapt to changing times. This is where Blockbuster failed, and that's why Blockbuster is no longer with us. They failed to adapt to the changing times. You need to do the same. As a short-term rental operator, you need to adapt to seasons, especially if you're in a seasonal area. You need to adapt to travel trends, how travelers start to change through time. There's a lot that goes on, but the key here is to be flexible and to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. You can't be rigid. You have to be extremely flexible in this business. Even more so where in today's society, we have pleasing a customer today is so much harder than it was 10 years ago. People expect more. In fact, good or bad, which I have a big issue with this, we really truly, especially in the US, live in an entitled society. Most people have an entitled mentality. And whether you agree with that or not, if you are in this business, you're in the hospitality business, you're gonna have to deal with those type of people. And there are a lot of them, and you need to be flexible and be able to adapt to that. Anyways, if you want to learn more on how to learn from other businesses and apply them to your business, then subscribe to this channel. Follow me on Instagram. Donate if you want to donate to this channel by buying me a coffee. The link's down below. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.